and welcome to another episode. I'm Celeste and I'm going to talk about everything I've been knitting lately. So first of all, it's been a few months since my last update. I have had busy, crazy stuff going on in my life. I also, related to that, hit a bit of a knitting slump, but then I have come back from that in the last 2 months or so. And then also in that time when I was not knitting as much, I think starting back in September, I became obsessed with a new art form, which is junk journaling. And I'll show you a little bit of what I got up to with that toward the end of the episode. I also worked on a huge sewing project in October, which was my daughter's Halloween costume, and I will show you some photos of that as well. But first, let's get into the knitting. So the first thing that I kind of pulled back out when my knitting slump started to waver, started to kind of get my mojo back, was this pair of mittens that I made for my daughter. I had knit all of the first mitten except for the thumb last year in December or maybe November. My intention was for them to be a Christmas present, and then I didn't make the deadline, or I got distracted by something else. This year I picked them back up again in January and finished them quite quickly. I wanted to make sure I could get them done while it was still winter. My daughter goes to school very close to where we live, so I walk her to school every morning, even in the winter, and it's really good to have our cold weather accessories on that little 20-minute walk. So wanted to make sure she had some hand knits to keep her cozy. And I also made these extra special for her. So I knit one of them with a little pink heart in the hand, which is a kiss from me when I drop her at school. I give her a little kiss in her hand to hold on to all day. So I incorporated that, and you'll also notice that this one is missing the thumb, and that is because my daughter is a thumb sucker. And one of the main reasons I wanted to make sure to get her some hand knit mittens is because she really, really resists wearing her store-bought ones because she wants to be able to suck her thumb. And yes, I know that it's bad for her teeth and blah, blah, blah. This is what we're doing for now. So I made them extra special. Also, her favorite color is purple, and her favorite thing in the world is unicorns. That has been very much the case for the last couple of years. So these were a special knit for her. I did these out of Drops Flora. I don't know the colors, but all the details are on Ravelry. You can find details for all of my projects on my Ravelry page, which I'll link below. I'm at Celeste Full there. I'm also at Celeste Full on Instagram. I'm currently taking a break from Instagram, and I'm not sure exactly what the future of that is going to look like. But right now I'm sharing more little bits of my knitting by adding shorts here to YouTube. I have uploaded 3 of them in the last month or so. I did one about how and why I knit my colorwork inside out. I did one about how much knitting I got done in a week, and then I did one about the finishing of this sweater that I'm wearing now, which I'll talk about soon. Yeah, so if you want more real time and little bits and pieces, recommend checking those out, and TBD on social media. I'm taking a break for now. So yeah, I did these with Drops Flora. They are definitely looking worn around especially on the palms, but that's just because they're so well loved. And yeah, these are the 3rd pair of mittens I've made for her, I believe. Mittens and socks when they're little and growing, I tell you, they run through them. Sweaters kind of last longer because you can sort of start oversized and become more fitted as they grow, and hats, you know, their heads are not changing sizes rapidly, but those hands and feet, oh my gosh, it's hard to keep up with them. The next thing I worked on was also something that had been sitting around for a long time, but much longer. So those mittens have been languishing for a year. I pulled those back out. I also pulled this back out, and in fact, I pulled this back out first. I should have talked about this first, but I got my chronology mixed up. I ended up finishing this. Well, I had pulled it out and started working on it in the evenings, and I talked about it in the last episode. But then I ended up finishing this, I think, the day before New Year's Eve, which felt really nice to like finish it with the old year, because I had initially cast this on almost 7 years ago. And it had always been a project that was like you would work on in bits and pieces, and you know, there were long periods where it never saw the light of day, but it felt incredible to finish it, and it felt really good to finish it with the new year and have that clean slate. So this is my Cozy Memories blanket. This was a big trend going on in the knitting world in 2017. And it's made with mitered squares. I have many, many episodes going back talking about it. I mostly made it with leftovers from individual projects, so that it actually does trap a lot of specific memories of what I was knitting at that time. The last few rows have been more just anything that I had that I could meet gauge with and finish it up. And as you can see, it has this just very, very eclectic, colorful palette, which made it quite appealing to my daughter, Coco, who was 5, when she saw me pull it out and start working on it earlier this year. And she asked if she could have it, and I said yes, of course. And this is now her special blanket. So although I started this back before I was even pregnant with her, just as a fun, scrappy project to have, it now is hers, and she sleeps every night with this on her. She takes it when she has a sleepover at Granny's house, along with her special stuffy. This has become her very special blanket that has mommy's love stitched into every stitch and keeps her safe at night. And it makes me really, really, really happy that this project that has been, memorializing all of these little projects along the way, and just so many ways that my life has changed in the last 7 years, the biggest one being becoming a mom. And now it's a special memory for her as well. So super duper happy to have finished this. Yeah, it's lovely. Love it. Okay, the final object to talk about is what I'm wearing. And this is the Novice Cardigan Mohair edition by Petite Knit. Let me show you my yarn because okay, well, first we need to take a moment for the bag. I adore this vintage bag. I got it from my friend's vintage shop, and it is so excellent. But I knit this cardigan with 2 strands of mohair, and they were 2 different colors, and in fact they're 2 different brands. Again, all the details for colorways and brands and whatnot, because I won't be able to hold it all properly in my head, are on Ravelry. But I know this one is the Knit Picks Mohair. This is some other random brand. And this color is called Cranberry, and that's, I don't know, some flower sounding name. And you can see this kind of like a bright red, and this is more of a magenta. And holding them together, I was able to get this slightly dark pinky red. Now, this came about because initially I had a sweater's quantity of some Brooklyn Tweed Arbor in this lovely dark red color called Vintner, which I had purchased to reknit one of my favorite sweaters, the Kirigami. I wanted to do it at a tighter gauge because I had done it at like a loose gauge back when I didn't really know that much about what I was doing, and so it pilled a little bit. And I purchased that because I love that sweater, and I also at that time had gained some weight during COVID, and so my Kirigami and none of my hand knits were fitting me at the time. So I wanted to reknit it at a tighter gauge and in my current size. I ended up getting sidetracked on that because I had a dye lot issue, and then I noticed it after I had already knit a ways up the body, and because I was knitting like late at night in the dark and I had this horrible color change and was gonna have to, rip it out. So I kind of set it aside because I couldn't deal with it, and then one thing led to another and it became not a priority anymore. I lost weight, so the size I was knitting wasn't even going to be the right size anymore. One thing led to another, and I started trying to come up with something else to do with the yarn. I decided I was going to knit a Oslo sweater. It's either Stockholm or Oslo. It's one of the drop sleeve Mohair sweaters by Petite Knit. And I was going to hold a strand of mohair with the DK weight arbor. So I ordered this mohair initially, had some kind of a brain fart and ordered like half the amount I needed. Then they didn't have it anymore. So I set that to the side and went, okay, now in this process of trying to de-stash, I have now added to my stash something I can't use. Went ahead, set that to the side, ordered the proper amount of this color from a different brand, thinking I could hold it with the arbor, and then ultimately kind of lost steam on wanting to do that entirely because I really started to want to make an all mohair cardigan and realized that if I held them together, I could do that and I could achieve that kind of nice dark red look because they blend beautifully together. Up close, it does have a little bit of heathering. Let's see if you can see the stitch definition a bit on here. But it's nothing you would even notice or know didn't come from the yarn itself. And yeah, it just makes the perfect red. Love how it worked out. It all was just serendipitous. And I still have all of that arbor that I haven't used, and I still have a bunch of this that I haven't used, and almost a whole skein of this. So look, I talk about this all the time, but I am not I always feel like I'm like, oh, I am just not at a stage in my life where like my brain is functioning the way that it should. But if you've been saying that for like 7 years, like when is that just who you are now? You know what I mean? It was grad school brain, and then it was pregnancy brain, and then it was mommy brain. Now, I think when you have a 5-year-old, you have to stop saying that you're postpartum and start saying that maybe you just don't have the mind you had in your 20s now that you're in your mid to late 30s. So Anyway, point being that I need to, when I attempt to do things like stash bust, I need to double check my work a little bit, do a better job of it. But the other thing is, and I think I've really kind of learned this, is it's nice when like yarn that you have in your stash works for something that you're inspired by. But if you push yourself too hard to just be picking projects based on what yarn it's going to be using up, rather than choosing the things that give you joy, especially if you're at a point in your life where you don't have as much time to devote to knitting as you wish you did, and you're not able to produce projects at the same rate that you once did, you really just, for me, like, I need to be giving my knitting time to just joy. Like, I am really at a spot now with my knitting where I'm like, I want to be knitting the things that I'm excited to knit. This is a hobby. This is the purpose of it. And, you know, like, do I sometimes look over at like the handful of sweater quantities I have in my stash that I don't know what I'm going to do with because my plans changed? Sure. But like, you can't totally just shame yourself about that and force yourself into choosing projects that are going to use them up if you're not jazzed about the project. And when I chose to make this mohair cardigan set, I was jazzed about it. And I worked on it almost monogamously and finished it in a month. And I love it. It was something I was excited to work on and excited to have. I've never knit an all mohair garment before. I was trying to think if I've ever knit an all mohair anything before. I've knit with one strand of mohair a part of a garment that I ended up never finishing way back when I was a teenager. It was like, you know, mohair on the top portion and more traditional yarn on the lower portion. So I guess there was that. But mostly I'm used to adding a strand of mohair to something else. So I was really surprised by it, and I'll take this off so I can kind of show you more what this fabric is like. But as you can see, when you hold it up to the light, it feels a bit transparent. I don't know if you can see, but I can see my raglan increase rounds. However, when you are wearing it, and I'll kind of use the sleeve as an example so you can see two layers of it, it does not look transparent at all. And in fact, reads very much as like a yarn knit at a normal gauge. Like, it doesn't feel, so this was 2 strands of the lace weight mohair, and I knitted at a DK gauge. So typically DK would be like 2 strands of fingerings. This is 2 strands of lace, so it is a bit, here's with my hand, you can see, still can't really see through it. So it is a bit of a looser gauge than, you know, typical, which makes it kind of drapey. But it doesn't feel like too loose of a gauge. I mean, it really did work out, and I think I will do more garments in the future that are 2 strands of mohair because I enjoyed the process, even though it didn't have any wool and therefore was not stretchy at all. And I typically hate knitting anything that doesn't have wool and isn't stretchy. I even hate knitting with superwash. But I don't know, I enjoyed it. It was so soft and floofy, and, you know, I was excited about the garment. I was excited to see the 2 colors come together. What else to say about it? Oh, I don't remember if one thing that happened during my knitting slump that I lost steam on, and I don't remember if I actually even introduced this project, or maybe I just showed you this swatch. I was knitting the pressed flowers cardigan, and I just totally quit it. I loved the pattern, and I loved working on it as a pattern. I hated choosing superwash wool for that was so stupid. And I did it because I like got in my head this like vision that I wanted for the colors, and ended up choosing these Madeline Tosh colors. And you know, I have worked with and loved Madeline Tosh yarn in the past. I think the last time I had worked with it was when I was pregnant, so like 5.5 years ago. But no more. It was just a slog, and it was the yarn. I mean, partly it was a slog because mosaic knitting goes really slowly, but I really was enjoying the rhythm of the mosaic knitting, and so I could have just enjoyed the process and been okay with the fact that it was going to take forever. If I had really enjoyed the feel of the yarn. So lesson learned, I am fully in my era of just superwash can't even come through the door. I'm not using it for socks. I'm not using it because I fall in love with some specific hand-dyed color that only comes in superwash. I'm just so done with it. I'm so done with it. I don't like the way it feels. I don't like the way it grows when you block it. I don't like the way it holds up. I don't like the way it gets all tangled when you're caking it. I don't like how it's not that warm. I don't need to rant about it anymore, but like, if you love it for you. It has taken me this long to like figure myself out, and I am not knitting with yarns that I don't love anymore. I just like, it's silly to do it. Now I'm going to show you my whips, and it's going to be interesting because one of them is the most Celeste yarn you could imagine. It's actually probably my favorite yarn. And the other is like, I'm going to say novelty is how I would describe it. It's a wild choice. It is weird. We'll get into that, but I would not enjoy or choose that yarn all the time, but it's fine for what it is. But yeah, I am branching out in weird ways, you know, like doing the all mohair is different. And I just purchased some pure silk from Knitting for Olive, which I'm going to be knitting with this spring. I'm going to do a video after this that is spring knitting plans, so look for that. I pushed myself outside of my, it's not even my comfort zone, outside of my oh my God, I love this zone, which is wool, which is untreated wool. And I try new things, and sometimes I enjoy them. And I did very much enjoy the mohair, and I will do it again. My buttons, I should have shown you them when I had this off. But I will kind of try to hide my face. They're just like plastic, kind of pearlescent red, the perfect color red. I went to Joann's and got these. I have the hardest time finding buttons at local fabric and locally owned fabric and yarn stores. I just find they always have such a small selection, and it is typically like not your basics. It's like specialty buttons. Oh, here's my mistake. I sized down my needles for the cuff, the first cuff, and then I fully forgot to do it for the second. And you can mainly tell the difference in my row gauge. And after I had done a tubular bind off with mohair, and it was the last thing I did on the sweater, and I was done, I just could not, I just could not rip it back and redo it so that it would be perfect. I just couldn't. So it's not perfect. That's okay. Remember that all these little imperfections are what makes a handmade item completely unique. Also, this has balloon sleeves, which I'm obsessed with now. First of all, they are so easy to knit because you don't have to decrease at all. You just knit a tube and then you do 1 round of decreasing. Love. But I also love the way they look. So I will probably be converting a lot of patterns to balloon sleeves in the future. But I got to remember that that means I will need more yarn. So future Celeste, do not muck that up. I assume you will. Okay, so that's everything that I have finished. And let me show you what I've been working on. Okay, let's start with the Weirdo novelty yarn. So I love a store-bought chenille sweater. Always have. They were big in the 90s. Recently, they kind of came back a little bit. Started seeing them in stores for the first time since I was a kid and, you know, got excited. And so I've always thought it would be fun to buy some weird chenille yarn, which is like a fully synthetic yarn. It is this. There we go. So it's this. It feels like velvet. I always thought it would be fun to try knitting my own. You know, like I said, it's not the kind of yarn I would typically work with, but I do know that I love the finished product as a sweater, and it just seemed like it would be a fun, different thing to do. Well, recently I bought my daughter a chenille sweater, which she loves, and so she started asking if I could make her one, and I thought, well, this is perfect, because I'd like to make one for myself, but it would be, you know, kind of perfect to make one for her because it'll be smaller. So if I do hate working with it, you know, smaller commitment. So then when I was in Joann's getting my buttons for this sweater, I saw they had, okay, and this also cracks me up, Juicy Couture. Juicy Couture branded Luxe Velour. I guess it's Juicy Couture because it's like, reminds you of like a velour tracksuit. I never fully would have like said chenille and velour are the same texture, but I guess it's similar. Anyway, that cracks me up, but I saw this and I saw that they had it in dark purple, which is my daughter's favorite color. There's so much light purple in the world. Everyone is pushing pastels on girls, and my daughter likes it perfectly fine, but dark purple is her favorite. So when I saw they had this in dark purple, I snatched it up. I immediately in the aisle pulled out my phone, went to Ravelry, and looked up drop shoulder bulky weight sweaters, and I found the Laney sweater, which is a very new pattern. I am the first project on the pattern, which is, you know, could be a mistake, but I'm just, you know, just think of it as a test knit. It'll be fine. It's been fine so far. It's fine. It's weird being the only project on the page, but it's fine. Now, I have made gauge. I've made gauge by sizing down from the needle that the pattern recommended, which I always do because I'm a bit of a loose knitter. Now, when I say I've made gauge, I did not knit a gauge swatch. I typically do knit a gauge swatch. I am a gauge swatcher. I did not for this because I just, you know what, I figured A, it's not going to make that big of a difference on an oversized sweater. B, I would kind of measure as I go, which I know doesn't typically work, but here's the thing. I'm not using wool, so like I don't know how it's going to block anyway. All hell could break loose. It could grow crazy like superwash, but I suspect that as a synthetic, it's not going to change whatsoever. And in fact, it's so flat already. It's so drapey. I feel like it's going to be exactly the same having been blocked as it is in the sweater. So I just kind of measured my actual project because I just was not feeling like swatching and waiting. I got super excited to get started on it and I just went. The pattern asks for bulkier yarn than this. And to get gauge, this is definitely a slightly more open gauge, then I would say this is the loosest I would knit this yarn at, is how I'll say it. It's fine. It's not see-through. I don't think it's too loose. It has a nice drape. I think it's going to feel good. I do feel like she could get little, stitches caught and like pull. And then you'll have to get in there and kind of pull them back in. I've even been doing that, having that problem a little bit as I've been knitting it. So that would be one reason. And another is, it's, the stitches look slightly more uneven, I think, when knit at like too loose of a gauge. So the gauge I'm knitting it at is probably a little bit too loose for the yarn, for what would be ideal for the yarn. That said, I'm knitting it at a gauge that, yeah, is like super close to what's on the label. So the pattern that I bought, one thing that's lovely about it is it does come in child and adult sizes all in one pattern, which is great. Super appreciate that, especially on a really simple pattern like this. So it's like the kind of thing that I can imagine, yeah, in the future being like, let me make myself a chenille sweater and use the same thing. It is a very simple top-down drop shoulder construction. And as far as I can remember, I have not done a top-down drop shoulder. Most drop shoulder patterns that I find are bottom-up. And when you do a bottom-up, it's super, super simple. You start at the bottom, you go all the way up, you split and kind of leave some of your stitches live so that you can do the front and do the back, and then you graft them at the top, either with a 3-needle bind off or with Kitchener stitch. And that makes your whole body. And then you can do the sleeves from there and the neck, right? Here, you're actually starting flat at the back neck, increasing out to create this trapezoid. Then you pick up separately from this shoulder and then from this shoulder to knit the fronts. Then you combine them together, knit a bit more length in the front. Then you combine the whole thing in the round and go down. So the stuff that you're doing is not necessarily more complicated, but you're doing all the shaping as like the very first thing you do, versus like kind of getting a feel for your yarn and your whatever you're doing and then doing it at the end. Also, if you are like kind of scared of like picking up stitches, or if you're a brand new knitter and you struggle to work on a pattern and kind of know what you're working on, like which section is this, how is this going to look in the end, like if you haven't totally wrapped your head around the construction of it, then a bottom up is sort of more intuitive in terms of it looks like what it's going to be and you kind of feel like you know what you're working on, and it's not like some weird shape where you're like, wait, am I picking up on in the right place or whatever. So like in general, I would, for like super duper beginners, I would do a bottom up as my first drop shoulder, unless you fall in love with a pattern that's top down, because I'm always one to say the best things to do as a beginner are the things you are excited to do. But anyway, that being said, it's super simple to do. And one thing that it does is it creates these sort of seams, and I don't know how well you can even see with this yarn, but here you go, along the back shoulder. Whereas my bottom up drop shoulder that I'm also working on, which I'll show you next, is joined with Kitchener stitch at the top. It's completely seamless. It doesn't have anything like that. So that's another thing to think about when you're choosing your construction is, do you like the look of that seam as a detail, or do you want something that's completely seamless? But yeah, I'm knitting this in the second size in the pattern, which she says is for ages 5 to 7. It is going to come out to about the same width as her other Chanel sweater that she likes. And I think it's going to be, yeah, just like a little bit oversized, but not crazy. Probably something she can wear for a couple of years. And then the sleeves will start being too short. Oh, and here's the other crazy thing about this is I knit all of this just not last night. So I got excited to cast it on, and I was sort of sitting down with my knitting plans and like, what, you know, projects am I working on? What am I trying to finish before I start whatever? What am I planning to take with me in my upcoming travel that we have? And, you know, what am I planning to knit for the spring? And when am I going to start it? And all that kind of thing. And I thought, well, if I just cast this on and got it, if I just cast this on and got it past the shaping and onto the you know, rounded round part of the body, then it would be a good mindless on the go, you know, project, or late at night when I'm too tired to focus on something type project. And yeah, and Coco's like really excited about it and wanted me to start it after I showed her the yarn. So I got excited to start it. So I cast on last night, and because it's at this gauge and it's a child size, I mean, it just went faster than anything. So that was fun. It is the yarn. The yarn is fun to work with because it's super soft. It's a little finicky to work with. Not as difficult as like a boucle or something where you're accidentally poking into the wrong loops. But, you know, it's a little harder to see your stitch definition when you're having to pick up stitches and do things like that. And like I said, the stitching can get a little bit uneven in places, and certainly it doesn't have any stretch to it. So, you know, it's kind of, it's extremely drapey, and it's kind of like a little bit floppy. Like I feel like if I had to rip back, I wouldn't feel as confident with just like pulling my needle out and ripping all the way back and then slipping my needle back in and knowing that I wasn't going to be like dropping stitches. Whereas when I'm working with a robust kind of a wool, I mean, I can rip back and no problem. And like, they're not going anywhere, you know, those loops are like hooked into each other. Okay. Last thing I'm working on is another sweater for my daughter. And this is the Anemone sweater, kids size, by Pernil, by Knitting for Olive. I forget her last name. This is a pattern that is available for kids and adults, but you have to buy separate patterns to get either the kids or the adults. And I'm knitting her the 4th size, I think, in the kids pattern, which I think says it's for a 6-year-old. I think this next smallest size is for a 4-year-old. So she's 5. I chose the 6. It is looking like it's going to be quite oversized on her. It is knitting up to gauge, and this is what I was expecting. But yeah, it's going to be quite oversized. I think it will probably fit her for like 3 years. Like, I'm planning on, if I have the yarn for it, knitting the sleeves slightly too long so that she could just cuff them for now, and that way she can uncuff them later and really get a long life out of this, because it is not just wide, but it's quite long on her as well. So yeah, I think I'm gonna do that and let it be a little bit too big for her now, and she won't mind. This is bottom up, as I mentioned earlier. So you cast on, you go here, you break, right? And the shoulders are done in Kitchener stitch. So you can see it's an invisible join right there between the two orangey reds. Where the flowers start going the other direction is where my Kitchener stitch is, and it'll be even more invisible after blocking. This is done in stranded color work, obviously, and this is my first time working stranded color work in the flat. So when you do a drop shoulder all over color work pattern, you typically can either work the flat portion back and forth, meaning you're purling and doing color work, or you can create steeks for the arms and for the neck hole, so that you knit the whole thing in the round and then you cut open your knitting. The pattern, something I love about this pattern is it gives you both options, and it fully talks you through doing it the steeking way or doing it in the flat. I have steeked before, so I decided I would try something I haven't done before, which is knitting color work in the flat. But before I fully committed to that, what I did was I knit my gauge swatch in the flat so that I could at least have a little bit of experience purling. And what I discovered was the biggest thing, I did not super mind purling, but there's a few things. When you're doing color work back and forth, you end up having to pick up and kind of wrap your yarn sometimes to prevent a hole in the same way you would do in intarsia. So if you're familiar with intarsia, it's like if you're knitting back across this way and then you get to the blue and you have your blue kind of hanging there, you have to pull it from the other side of the beige or else you'll just leave a hole, right? The specifics of that were not in the written pattern. She might have like a video or something that she linked. I don't quote me on whether she leaves you high and dry with that or not. I didn't feel high and dry because I just sort of saw that it was happening, and because I've done intarsia before, I knew what to do to address it. So that would be like one thing that is an extra thing you have to think about when knitting colorwork in the flat. The other thing is I had no idea how to catch my floats purling, and I kind of was trying some different things that didn't seem obvious. Now, I could have just gone and looked that up, but in the moment I was, I don't know, tired, wanting to start doing this and not spend more time researching something, just didn't care that much, and decided that I would do another kind of an experiment, which is, and I think part of this was I had just been watching Woozy by Celine, and she was knitting her first colorwork mittens, and she did them without catching her floats, and like, I think she knit her first pair, she did catch her floats, and she felt like it was kind of visible where she had caught them. I don't know if she did something wrong or if it was a tensioning issue. She could sort of see through. So on her second pair that she did for her mom, I think I'm getting this right, she decided not to catch her floats, and she was like, oh, this is fine. No, I definitely wouldn't think to not catch my floats on mittens, because that would be the first place where I would think your fingers are going to get trapped. So the fact that she said it was fine, like, kind of made me go like, you know what, maybe I'll just try not catching my floats, since I don't know how to catch them on the purl side, and, you know, we'll just go with that. So here's my inside. I have some quite long floats. None of them are caught. I think it still looks nice because it looks nice and uniform. I didn't catch them when I was knitting in the round as well as in the flat, just so that I would be consistent in case it affected my gauge or something like that. But I do think I'm going to catch them on the sleeves, because the sleeves will be knit entirely in the round, and I think that would be where she'd be more likely to catch a finger or something pushing through the sleeve. So I think I'll be doing that. But yeah, didn't catch my floats. For the future, I will have to learn how to do that when I'm purling. Oh, okay. This also is a pattern where you have to use 3 colors at once for one round out of every flower. There's a round where you first introduce the flower and you still have a round of the leaves. So you're using the green, the color of the flower, and the background color all in the same round, which isn't my favorite. I don't think it's anybody's favorite. Here's what I would have done differently writing the pattern, and what I would have possibly altered myself if I had, again, been in like the headspace to like do a little bit of extra work. that row is a purl row when you're knitting in the flat. Now, I just think that's unnecessary. I think you could have timed it to where the 3-color row is a knit row so that you're not purling and dealing with 3 colors at once. And for me to have changed that once I got to the flat section, when I'd already been doing the round, I would have like ended up with an extra row of background, which probably no one would have seen, but then I also would have had to remember that that's what I was doing. And as we have established, there's only so many things my brain can focus on at once. So I didn't, and it was fine. But yeah, like I said, if I were like test knitting this or something and I were giving feedback to the designer, I would say maybe switch this up so that that row is a knit row. Perhaps she never even noticed it because she knit hers steeking. I don't know. I believe, so I've just finished the body. I think what I'm going to do is pick up and knit the neck first, and then do the sleeves. That way it's done and I don't have to do it at the end because it's the kind of like not as fun part. Also I think, you know, when you pick up the neck and do it, that's when it really starts to look like a finished sweater. And I also think at that point I can try it on my daughter and have a good idea of what it's going to look like on her and how the neck is lying and all of that. And then, you know, the sleeves are kind of easier to imagine, if you will. It has balloon sleeves, I think, which is nice with all of our color work because you don't have to decrease and interrupt the rhythm of your chart. And I have knit all of these flowers from the bottom up on the body, but I will be knitting them from the top down on the sleeves because I'll be knitting from here. So there's a separate chart for that. It's the same chart upside down, you know what I mean? It'll be interesting to see, like in the photos you don't really notice, but technically if you do look super close, like it's a slightly different shape because all the V's are going in the other direction, you know? Now, if that bothered you, you could very easily knit the sleeves from the cuff up and then seam them. And if it bothered me, I would do that. But who wants to do that? Not me. So I won't be doing that. But there's your tip if you want to, you know, like make it super perfect or something. Now the yarn, my fave. Do I have a label? Yeah, the label's right over here. Hang on. Yeah. The yarn is Derrera Natura Ulysse, which is their sport weight. And I adore this yarn. So the yarn is it's 100% wool. It is made with a combination of French merinos and then Portuguese. Sorry, I'm reading this in French, which I am not fluent in. Some other breed that's from Portugal. So it's a combination, and I believe that the Portuguese is like a darker, like a dark gray wool. So if you look at the colors, they're like slightly marled in this way. That's like a, because it's been dyed on a bit of a marled base. Now, another unique thing about this yarn is that it is I forget what they call it, but it's like a combination worsted woolen spun. So like the wool is sort of prepared for, I'm not a spinner, so I don't know exactly what I'm talking about, but I believe it is sort of like prepared to spin in the worsted way, in the woolen way, where it's not like combed completely straight, but it's more kind of going everywhere so it can trap air. But then it is spun using some kind of worsted spinning technique, so that what you end up with is this yarn that has the airiness of a worsted, keep saying it wrong, the airiness of a woolen spun yarn, but a bit more of the smooth stitch definition that you would get with a worsted spun yarn. So they're kind of giving you the best of both worlds, which I love. I typically will go for a woolen over worsted. I love woolen yarn. I love how squidgy it is. I love how lightweight it is. I love how warm it is. So this is also the stretchiest. I don't think it's showing you. There you can kind of see it. This is genuinely the bounciest, stretchiest. But it's not fragile at all. Like, you can easily break it, so you don't have to carry around scissors, but it will not break on you accidentally because you're a tight knitter, the way something like a Brooklyn tweed shelter might. It's the perfect yarn for me. I first knit with this back when I was pregnant. I purchased it to make this lovely little cardigan for my daughter called the Arc-en-Ciel that I made out of gray and with these colored stripes. I bought these mini skeins. I think it was the kit for the sweater was from De Rum Natura. But I loved it then, and I don't know why it took me so long to pick it up again, other than I had the most epic of knitting slumps during COVID when everyone else in the world picked up knitting and was going crazy with it. Yeah, I was not. But I picked it up again for this. This is not the yarn this was written for, obviously. It's a knitting for olive pattern, so it was written for knitting for olive yarn. I did take inspiration from the colors in the sample, but I kind of did my own thing as well. And of course, I went with what was available. And De Rum Natura has just really gorgeous shades. They all harmonize with each other beautifully. Part of that is the marled base that they're dyed on, so they all have a bit of that darkness running through, a bit of that earthiness. And I just think every single color in their line just pairs beautifully with the rest. You can't go wrong. My base is Quartz, which is this very pinky beige. And the names of all the other colors are on my Ravelry. I just remember quartz because I think of like rose quartz, and it's just, yeah, lovely. And the other amazing thing about this yarn is my daughter, who is sensitive to wool, my daughter who basically doesn't wear her Halloween sweater that she designed and had me knit for her, that she promised she liked the yarn, and I tried on her while I was making it and asked her if it was too itchy. She basically won't wear it now unless it's over a turtleneck. But this, and I believe her, maybe she's lying to me again, but this I think is fine for her. It is most certainly much softer than the yarn I used for that. I think this is quite soft for a natural yarn. Like, quite soft. So it is just genuinely the ideal, just yarn from heaven is what it is. Okay, so that's everything I've been working on, and I will save the yarn that I've bought recently and the yarn that the patterns that I plan to make with it for the spring knitting plans video, so you can watch that separately. But real quick before I go, I will show you just a little bit of my other artistic endeavors that I was working on during my slump. First, my daughter's Halloween costume. So she wanted to be Belle, and she specifically asked me, Belle from Beauty and the Beast, she specifically asked me to make her dress, which she's never asked me to make her costume before, so that was really exciting. Like, I grew up with my mom making my Halloween costumes to, you know, my design specifications. It was very special. So I was excited to have her ask me. And I took her to Joann's and we turned through the pattern books and found the bell pattern that she wanted and picked the fabrics that she wanted. And she was Belle, and it was this incredible undertaking because it was a lot of bits and pieces, and it was kind of, I mean, it's basically just a full ball gown. It was not perfect. I am not a perfect seamstress by any means, but we did it up for her exactly how she wanted it, added little red rosettes, and I absolutely loved making it for her. It stressed me out a little because it was a lot, and I certainly left parts of it too long to where I was kind of, you know, down to the wire a little bit. I think like 2 nights before Halloween, I think I like texted my friend who also sews like a picture of my progress, and then she texted me back and she was like also sewing her daughter's Halloween costume at the same time, and it was just like, oh yes, moms who make Halloween costumes everywhere are all doing this right now. Kind of felt like a nice moment of solidarity, but it turned out so lovely. Now, the one unfortunate thing is I hemmed it when she was not at home, again, because I was kind of down to the wire, and it was a little bit on the long side. I should have re-hemmed it, but I didn't think it would be a problem because she had requested that we stay home and give out candy instead of trick-or-treating. But at the last minute, she decided she wanted to trick-or-treat with her school friends all her best friends from school also live in the neighborhood. She has 3 best friends from her class, and they all wanted to trick-or-treat together. So she, at the last minute, decided she wanted to do that. It was also raining, so it was wet, and she's walking around trying to walk up steps, and her dress is a little long. That was not ideal at all. And I think in her memory, Mommy ruined Halloween. I think is how she's thinking. Hopefully, one day she will look back and think of it as the time her mother made her a beautiful bell dress. But right now, it's kind of half and half. It's, oh, I love that bell dress, but also remember how you made it too long, Mommy, and it sort of ruined trick-or-treating. And ultimately, she wanted to come back and give out candy anyway. We really only trick-or-treated for a short while. She's not a big trick-or-treating girl. She prefers to give it out. She just wanted to, you know, keep up with her friends, and Mommy ruined it. So, and just keep that in mind, parents out there. Anytime that you try to make the perfect thing and you stretch yourself beyond anything you've ever made before, and you stay up every night, you will probably still ruin their lives. So just keep that in mind. They'll still love you. You'll still love them. But, you know, if you want to just not even try, the results will be the same, if not better. So don't think that you're ever going to get any real rewards for the hard work you put into making something for your children, because you probably won't. But that's okay. That's not why we do it. We do it because we love to do it, and we do it because we love them. Okay, so that was my sewing, and then I got obsessed with junk journaling. I filled an entire journal that's back there. Then I filled this one, and then I started a third. This is something I found on, and I also did this little travel one. This is something I found on TikTok, and if you'd like to see in more detail all of my junk journaling, I am on TikTok at @meandjunk. I posted some of them to my Instagram, but not very many. And yeah, so this is a journal. It's basically collaging and scrapbooking, but particularly with an emphasis on like trash, like things that you would throw away. Like this was the top of a box that pastries came in, for example. Let me see, so there's some of my favorites in here. Oh, here, I did this one for Coco's birthday. I actually put her candles in. So like, you know, you make it really chunky if you want. Did this Christmassy one with like vintage cookbook that I got at the thrift store and this like vintage card that I found at the recycling center. So you can kind of just reuse your own junk. You can add stickers and magazine clippings and stuff. You can go in search of other junk at antique malls and vintage places and incorporate that in. You can do just junk dumps. You can do more themed spreads. You can do spreads that all the junk is sort of from a particular day or your activities that day, which is like what this is, where it doesn't necessarily, the theme isn't like clear to anyone who looks at it, but it sort of means something specific to you. So fun. I did a whole bunch of these that are sort of Valentine's-y. You can do these like flaps. This is my new one. This one I got a bigger canvas to experiment with. Front page. And I did a ton of Valentine ones in here because I just love pink and red are my favorite colors, and I just love like all the Valentine's aesthetics. So this one is just completely Queen of Hearts themed. It has little cutouts from books I found at the thrift store, as well as like from a newspaper and a real playing card and bits of scrap paper. And here's like a key I got at the recycling center. The recycling center, if you don't have one in your city, is just like literally like other people's junk, and you just come and you can take it, like egg cartons and stuff, and like carpet samples, and so this one has like a little page inside of it. Oh, I love this. I made this little pizza box because we made heart-shaped pizzas on Valentine's Day. Made that little pizza box, and then I like put in the pictures. I printed them out. Trader Joe's, Fearless Flyer in here. Pictures of our actual pizzas that we did. The packaging from the Trader Joe's pizza dough and from the pepperonis. This one I did for I had a blessing way for my friend who's pregnant, and I used a lot of the materials from the stuff I used to put together her charcuterie board, and then we did like this red thread ceremony, so I have this bit of red yarn. This is actually the arbor I was talking about earlier, the Brooklyn Tweed Arbor, which we're all wearing until the baby comes, and I put a bit of it in here as well. And this was like the sign for the mocktail that I had made. And then I did this like Barbie one, like little beads. She folds down. These are mostly clippings from a magazine. There was like a magazine that came out when the movie was out that was like all Barbie stuff. Yeah, and the rest of this one's to be filled. But so that's been super, super, super fun. It's so nice for me when my knitting takes a dive for whatever reason. Sometimes it's my energy levels, or it's that I'm trying to make myself do some project like the pressed flowers cardigan that I'm not actually really wanting to do. But when the mojo takes a dive, oftentimes I will still need a creative outlet, and then I can find sort of other things, whether it's drawing or whatever. And so it's like the right time to stumble upon this particular thing on TikTok, and I got super obsessed with it. I have just made probably like almost 200 spreads. And I started in September, so that's like 5 months? Yeah, and that's all I got for you. I think this is maybe a slightly long episode. We'll see when I edit out all my rambling. But yeah, thanks for checking in again. Look for that spring knitting plans video, and I will see you next time. Bye.